And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dennis Vega from our Office of Foreign Assistance. And he's going to go over some of the planning processes for what the department takes into consideration. So.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name's Dennis Vega. I'm from the Office of U.S. Foreign Assistance Resources here at the State Department. So a little bit about the office for those of you that aren't familiar. We are a joint state and USAID office. We're made up about 50% state employees and 50% USAID employees. We do a couple of different things. We manage the strategic planning for state and USAID on the country level and then also on the bureau level. So we do what they call integrated country strategies, which are whole of government strategies that USAID does development strategies, and those play into the country strategies, but we do it on behalf of the whole government, working with the Bureau for Budget and Planning here at state. They do the diplomatic engagement, state operations type stuff. So we do that. We also do the budget. So we allocate resources for state and USAID on foreign assistance, working with partners at USAID with their budget office and the policy office there. We also do performance management. So that's the annual performance reporting that we have to do for all foreign assistance. And we do state evaluations. So I guess we do other stuff too. So my office does aid transparency as well. So those of you that are familiar with foreignassistance.gov, that's run out of my office. And so we lead that effort on behalf of the entire U.S. government. We also have a policy analysis team that does some policy work on things that are foreign assistance related, mostly focused on things where security assistance and development assistance and humanitarian assistance cross. So those are kind of the broad things about my office. We're divided into three groups. My group, which is the planning, performance, and systems team that does the strategic planning, the things that I talked about in the information systems, the budget team, and then the policy team. So those are kind of the broad scope of what we do. So one of the things they asked me to talk about is kind of how we make budget decisions and what the budget process is, and this specifically how we make democracy decisions. So we manage basically all the things I talked about. We call the Managing for Results framework. It's basically a planning to performance management framework. So what we do is we look at strategic plans both at a country and a regional level. We look at every year missions come in, or our posts come in with what we call the mission resource request. It's basically their budget request for the year at a country level. And that's a joint state and USAID document. We take that information that we gather there. We have what we call functional roundtables, and they're basically, we get technical experts from across state and USAID and some other organizations when it comes to security sector, and look at those sectors and look at allocations across the world, and from a technical perspective, look at where we should prioritize funding. So for agriculture, we'll look at what are the biggest drivers to reach our Feed the Future goals, or for democracy programs, we look at different dynamics, whether it's country performance, need, whether there's political elections coming up, different things that that the technical experts, both in DRL and the Dacha Bureau at USAID and the regional groups, get together and kind of prioritize funding in those and look at what kind of level of funding we need. So then it goes to the bureaus, most of the regional bureaus for country programs, and then the functional bureaus for the worldwide programs that they manage. What basically happens there is they take the input from the missions, the input from the technical experts, and make recommendations on what they need from a bureau perspective, or in the case of the regionals, across the region. So that's where we come into play after that. So we look at basically the entire world and the entire budget and make decisions on what are the prioritizations. We have to manage the administration priorities, the secretary's priorities, the USAID administrator priorities, and trying to figure out how those match with the bureau priorities and the country priorities. And we go through a process, we review it with the deputy secretary for management and resources, and then we present it to the Office of Management and Budget, goes to Congress, and then we get money. So that's kind of the broad process that we go through on budgeting and how we come to decisions and kind of the broad functions. I didn't want to take up too much of your time kind of going through things if you didn't care about any of this and just had specific questions, especially since we're running late. So if you guys have specific questions on the role of our office, how we come to budget decisions, how we look at performance, how we look at strategy, any of those things, feel free to ask, or I can just keep rambling. That's good too. Yep.
Hi, my name is Ethan Frisch. I'm from an organization called the Bond Street Theater. I had a question about on-budget versus off-budget funding in foreign assistance. How do you make decisions about what goes through a foreign government versus what goes through NGOs locally or based in the U.S. or elsewhere?
Sure. So I think so there's specific things laid out in rules and congressional legislation. Our appropriations bill allows us to go on budget for only under specific circumstances. So we go through that criteria. I can't, off the top of my head, name all of them, but most of the time it's based on the capacity, the level of corruption, whether or not it's a trusted institution, and it also is dependent on ministries. So there may be some instances where you can certify that a ministry is okay, but maybe another one isn't, so it's not kind of a broad brush. So we take a look at that, and a lot of those are done at the mission level and then kind of at the bureau level. But that's really what we focus on. Some of them are long-standing memorandums of understanding with the governments, and especially on the foreign military financing and some of the security sector things. So that kind of determines how we're going to do that. And then there's political considerations and those types of things as well. And no one else? Okay. That was short. Sure. She wanted to talk about what are our upcoming priorities. So I think some of the priorities are obviously, we have a lot of administration priorities right now. The presidential initiatives, Feed the Future, global health, global climate change are big priorities for this administration. So we'll continue to do that. There's been a big push in the last few years on increasing our use of science and technology and development and foreign assistance, so those continue to be big priorities. On the security sector side, counter-narcotics continues to be a huge priority for us. Also, foreign military financing, we have MOUs with Jordan, with Israel that will continue to be big parts of our budget. There are different things that are coming up. I think that's one of the hardest parts about this job is trying to prioritize the immediate needs and the long-term development goals. Obviously, humanitarian assistance is a huge priority given the fact that we have all of these different crises going on, and that will continue to grow. It doesn't seem like that's kind of letting up at all. So Syria, countering ISIL. We are now looking at Zika is another thing that we're having to deal with and trying to figure out how we deal with that with the limited information we have now, and seems to be moving pretty quickly. Central America has continued to be a large priority for us, especially in democracy and human rights aspects and governance, and that will continue to be a big push. So basically everything is a priority because the world's complicated. We have a lot of stuff that needs to get done. It doesn't seem to be getting easier. Those tend to be the biggest priorities. I think one of the things that is difficult about the position we're in is that kind of at a broader level, resources have not been increasing. I think in 2010 we had our high watermark of resources, but as a lot of you know, through whether it was sequestration or the Budget Control Act or different things, there's been a steady, or I guess we say now that an even budget for year over year is like an increase because we're so worried about getting cut. So I think that budget environment has made us have to make some difficult choices. Also, in an environment where the world is getting more complicated. When I started working on the budget 7-8 years ago, we were starting to look at downward trends in Latin America and Europe, and saying, okay, well, we're making a lot of progress here. We can shift money from here to other priorities. Africa, we had a big push in agriculture, some of those programs, global health, and then that space went away. So with the issues a few years ago with unaccompanied children and the issues in democracy and human rights in Latin America and Central America, that we had to pick that back up again with the issues that happened with the Russian pressure and those types of things. Our posture in Europe changed as well. And then in the same thing in the Middle East with all of the issues happening around Syria and the neighboring countries, the humanitarian needs there increase as well. So I think that has been one of the most difficult things about the current budget, is that it doesn't seem like the world's getting easier. And as you all know more than most people, it keeps getting more and more complicated, and there keeps being more and more things that we need to do, and the money is not always there. So we try to focus on performance, on need, on the political realities of what we have to do to make it happen, but those are kind of the big pieces. Okay. Wow. Okay, look at that.